Welcome back. You're watching Morning Live. 18 minutes to 8 o'clock on this Tuesday morning. As promised, let's focus in now on the continent, because Africa this year was full of contradictions, people's revolutions and deposing of African leaders and generals. The continent was also faced with humanitarian disasters, from Ebola to Cyclone Idai and recent floods in KZN. Many countries held presidential and parliamentary elections, and many great souls passed on. Let us look back at the continent, starting with North Africa and what transpired from there. We're joined in studio by Advocate Sipho Mantula. He is a researcher at the Institute for Dispute Resolution in Africa at UNISA. A very good morning and welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you, my sister. Refreshing morning even to the viewers. Jambo Africa.
Let's start with with North Africa, the North Sudan professionals and the Sudanese women leading the protests against General Omar al-Bashir in April, and they struggled to form a transitional government. What's the status there?
You know, if one can look back at the North Africa, this was very turbulent year, looking at how the role of women and the youth professionals, as you have indicated, in North Sudan, taking over General Bashir and other leaders of his government, crying on many issues, economic challenges, political reform, elections that were even bound to happen in 2020. And now Transitional Council, it is there. There is a new prime minister who's going all around asking for Sudan to be removed as the terrorist state. Now you have the South Sudan and the North Sudan coming together on the issues of oil. But you have women as well taking leadership in North Sudan and even able to celebrate some of their festive days without the military rule of General Bashir. And again, we see General Bashir going to a reform facility by the end of this year. And Algeria, so sad, a country that has been in turmoil since April. Until now, they've got elections just during this month. Algeria as well, a very contradiction. They won Africa Cup of Nations in 2019. So you ask yourself, a country in protest, but in a soccer field, they can master the soccer skills. But when you look at the politics of that country, Algeria is a country as well with contradictions. Libya, Tunisia is always pressing issues. Now, we see Libya now. We see Tunisia went for the elections. There's a new leader in Tunisia, an academic, a law professor, who has taken over Tunisia. So one can say that North Africa was not relatively calm. It was in a turbulent space.
You mentioned what's been happening in North Sudan and the fact that we actually see women leaders actually rising to the top. Whenever they do global parity studies on gender equality, Africa is really at the lowest ranks in comparison to the rest of the world. Do you see that this is maybe a trend that's going to continue, where more and more women leaders are going to be coming to the fore from the continent?
No, definitely. But look at the elections in 2019. We had a deficit of women leadership as candidates. You look at the presidents who have even taken over. But we can still, one can say, have a resonance on looking at the women in Ethiopia, their cabinet. We look at the women in Sudan as well, in the justice ministry. And it is important that we don't see the role of women as just to add the quota. Rwanda has been very good in terms of their parliamentary members. South Africa went for the elections. They put for the quota system of 50-50. EFF just went for the elections. They have a 3-3. It's only in the ruling party where you still have the not balanced leadership. But when you look at the role of women, it's what Baba Credo Mutua once said, the mother mind. We need a women's leadership in Africa, not as to fill the gap. Surprisingly, Kagame in Rwanda is saying he's willing to step out and give a woman the role to be a leader in Rwanda. We will still have to check with the general whether is he going to fulfill that promise. But the role of women in South Sudan was seen with the Kandaka women, the women of South Sudan, of North Sudan, taking over the military in June, fighting on the issues around democracy and as well as their right to protest.
We're going to stay there. General Omar al-Bashir, you did mention he's going to a social reform facility because they say that people over the age of 70 can't go to jail. It was said that they're going to appeal the corruption charges that were laid against him, and this is over and above the other charges that still hang over his head.
It is said General Bashir is going for another appeal, but he's having other charges that are going to be open for him in the Darfur genocide. And General Bashir was still charged on economic crimes. The political crimes of 1989 are haunting him and other generals. Now, when you look at Bashir, it's very critical that his intelligence officer, who is exiled now, is being looked after now. They are looking for him in Sudan. So Sudan as well, it's a ticking time bomb of how do you deal with militarization, with the rule of law, with justice. But I think it is how that region will try to deal with their challenge. But Ethiopia has been instrumental, actually, in the mediation of the crisis in Sudan, in the North Sudan, as well in the South Sudan.
North Africa has just been a hotbed of changing political heads. You mentioned Algeria. You also mentioned Tunisia. And I want to focus in a little bit on Tunisia because the new president, Professor Kais Saied, took over. And it was reported that it was because he was able to woo that youth vote that actually won it for him.
And he was doing a strange and what we call a door-to-door campaign. And he was not even compromised by the politics of Tunisia, of power, of militarization. And I think the power of using law and politics helped him a lot. And I think, again, his stance on the question of how Turkey is playing its role in Libya. And again, he's looking at the role of Tunisia in the North African region, because North African region, as you said, it has not been a very, relatively calm and peaceful, but it has been very hostile, volatile, and not working even for the youth of that country, but the youth in Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, North Sudan, we have seen them rising in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to think back to that Arab Spring and what an impact that made. Let's move from North Africa. Let's go to West Africa now. We can't speak about West Africa without speaking about this new currency that they've got. 8 members coming together. They're wanting to set aside the CFA franc and have what they call the eco-currency.
I think that again is a misnomer, because the franc of the CFA, it is a colonial currency that has been working all along since the 1960s. This is a misnomer because the rates and taxes and dues are still going to the former colonizer. So I think the issue of Africa not to unite to have its currency is what Eco-Africa is doing, because France is trying to take out Abuja out of the deal. They are trying to bring Ghana in. Cameroon, it is still not clear. Guinea-Bissau, it is not clear. But the issue of colonizing people with the currency is what happens to Zimbabwe. What happens to South Africa at some point. So it is important that the new currency in West Africa, for me or for other analysts, we are critical in the sense that Emmanuel Macron of France is very critical of what he's planning to do with West Africa on this issue of the common currency. Because the common currency have to assist these countries. They don't have to be paying money to France anymore. But like I'm telling you, it's what other analysts, they call it a hat trick that is hitting back on those 8 African countries that are in West Africa. And Wallace and Ouattara from Ivory Coast might be leading this pack to the den.
So are you saying that that France may institute like some kind of sanctions against these countries and maybe restrict trade if they take away their franc?
France won't do that. France is doing what you call economic diplomacy of sabotaging the whole process, because France is aware that African Union, West Africa is pushing towards a common currency. The Africa Free Trade is coming into effect in July 2020. Now, Africa cannot still be paying their dues and the printing of their currency in Europe. We have to print money in Africa, and we have to reduce the taxes. So it's very important when you look at how France has been playing its role in the Sahel region. We look at conflict resolution, how France has been gymnastic, playing hide and seek. So for me, it is that France, it is somewhere how coming with the say that colonialism was a mistake. It's the same like apartheid. Agents will say apartheid was a mistake in this country. How can it be the mistake when people have suffered? So if you look at the role of the currency, the common currencies in Africa, Africa Development Bank was supposed to lead us. The African Union financial policies was supposed to lead us. But South Africa will be taking over in 2020. We expect them to deal with this common currency issue.
I mean, that eco-currency, which you say is just a small step in this direction to a common currency in Africa. Are you positive about it? Do you believe it's going to take off?
Not really. It might take off in 2020 because they're looking at end of 2020. They're not clear. Ghana is trying to give them their model of Cedi. Why are we using Cedi as the currency? And it's not only Ghana. Nigeria is very strong. We are talking of the superpower in the African Union. Now, these are West African countries that are still caught up in power mongering, and most of them are aging and ailing leaders. If you look at how a young French president can convince people like Ouattara and tells them that, no, look at your eco-currency. It's important that Africa thinks about beyond the currency development. Peace, security is what is an immediate requirement that West Africa needs now.
Do you believe that this will be one of the biggest points for that area in the year to come?
Not only that, Africa free trade is what is going to dominate. Nigeria has been critical on the fake goods and closing their borders. They will be opening them, but they want people to be regulated. You look at the role of Mali. Mali is playing a critical role in cultural industry, because one other aspect in cultural diplomacy in Africa we are failing to do is the cultural industry. Why is it suppressed? Why Africa is not benefiting from cultural trade? Why Africa is not benefiting from its natural resources? Rather, they're taking their resources to Europe. So 2020, when we are silencing guns, it means we have to even silence the foreign bankers in Africa. How do we stop the foreign bankers to come and steal from Africa under the name of investment, when actually they are using investment and aid, when actually they've looted, they've exploited, they've raped Africa?
Yeah, and that's not something that you see just in West Africa, it's all across the continent. Let's move over to East Africa now. We saw the election of Tanzania led the SADC in August 2019, Zimbabwe to chair Troika. Your thoughts on that?
That is critical when Tanzania took over the SADC, taking from Namibia, but even that League of African Leaders needs to be reformed. SADC has been sleeping on many things. The Cyclone Idai passed on their face. They could not have an early warning system. They could not even come clear with the Malawi elections. They could not come out clear with the Zimbabwe elections. The Mozambique elections. Zimbabwe, remember, when it's chairing the Troika on peace, security and defense, is leading the observer missions in the SADC. Tanzania is closing the space of the civil society in the SADC region. So one can say that the SADC region as well, it is a league of elites of African leaders who they don't even want to create SADC National Committee. And they have to even create the SADC people-to-people relation, my sister, because even the trade relations in the SADC, we saw what happened in South Africa in August, September, the Afrophobia, the black-on-black violence.
Yeah.
The SADC countries were fuming. They were angry against South Africa, when actually they're benefiting from South Africa.
Yeah.
Electricity is being given to Zimbabwe, Eswatini, Malawi, Botswana. Crime that has been committed in this country, we can still say the stats indicate African nationals, but we don't want to be very specific, but we want to say where you come from, you don't commit crime because the laws are strict. So I can say to you, the SADC region was volatile because the SADC observer missions that have been going on this all elections, those elections are going to court now. We saw Botswana, Namibia, they've gone to court. So it says to us, are these electoral observer missions really observer missions, or are they the tourists going to observe elections? You know, so that's our critique actually when we look at the SADC in terms of observing elections in 2019.
Let's speak about here at home in South Africa, yeah, and what happened, and specifically the extreme weather that we have experienced,
yeah,
some of the natural disasters. Yeah. Do you feel that the government were able to deal with that and provide the kind of support that South Africans needed?
No, definitely. And I think we have to acknowledge even humanitarian groups that are assisting government. I think we have been active to respond, but our humanitarian disaster management plans doesn't need authorization of memos. We need to train young people to be humanitarian helpers. We don't have to take time to go and assist people who are flooded in Tshwane, Mamelodi. We have to be effective on climate change when there is drought. Our government cannot sit back and wait for a DG to sign a memo for somebody to do the work. It's important that we need to be effective, respond, train young people to be environmentally conscious on issues, and at the same time saying we need to acknowledge even our government its role in Mozambique. Remember when Cyclone Idai hits, our soldiers were in. We saw our soldiers in Tshwane, they were in when there was a flooding in a fancy hotel. We saw our soldiers coming in. So you can see how our humanitarian disaster, my sister, we have to beef it up, but don't make it a bureaucratic system, because Africa is bleeding, Africa is not leading.
Yeah, and we also need quick response to things. We don't need to be going through mountains of paperwork to be able to actually see a need and help that.
Correct.
Thank you so much, Advocate Sipho Mantula, who is a researcher. Asante, have a wonderful 2020. Thank you for coming into studio to chat to us today.
Thank you very much.